All right. Today we're going to be talking about operating system virtualization, the methods and benefits of virtualizing the operating system. Here are some general things about the... Okay, so today we're going to be talking about operating system virtualization, the methods and benefits of virtualizing the operating system. Here are some general things about the slideshow we're going to be having today. The reason I chose specifically operating system virtualization to this slideshow was because it was the most interest. It had the most interest in the discussion leading, mostly on operating system virtualization. So we're going to be excluding, for example, virtual reality, and augmented reality. And the outline of this slideshow, we're going to be going through benefits, some concrete examples, then disclaimers and cons, and lastly, the methods of achieving virtualized operating system. Already a disclaimer, sorry for the flickering background. It is mostly because of my own modifications, so sorry about that beforehand. So these are the benefits we're going to be talking about, and I'm going to give some examples of these later on, but for now we're just going to go like a quick look through on what we're going to talk about. One benefit is not being limited to one operating system, for example, Linux, Macintosh, or Windows. And we can choose the right operating system on the go. And the counterpart of virtualized operating system is a dual boot, which is, for instance, you will plug your USB into your computer, and each time you restart your computer or power it up, you ought to choose your operating system. But with virtualized environments in operating systems, you can choose the operating systems on the go, so you don't have to reboot every time you want to change your environment where you work with. So the best of both worlds is also something that comes with different operating system. For example, you almost know that in the Windows environment, if you want to install a program, you need to install the .x file from the internet usually, and then you install it. And each time, if it's badly written, each time it needs an update, you ought to download another x.exe file from the internet just to update your system and software. Well, not system, but mostly software. For example, Linux has pacmans, not like literally pacmans, but well, we'll talk about those later. Also, the open source is a great thing, and the dedication of the resources, both in the consumer market and in multi-corporates, that's a very good thing too for the environment, because of the electricity bills are being reduced by the virtualized environments, thus being wall-friendly. But we'll get to those later too. Larger pool of tools to choose from. This is mostly software and programs, and the security aspect of a virtualized environment. We're going to be discussing that too a little bit later on. So these are the main points I actually want to give out from this slideshow, so that there's something to be remembered. And we're going to be going through each of these in a very specific examples, so we can actually see them manifest themselves. First one being the operating system Switchup. As I talked about first, was the dual boot versus virtualized machine, and that actually gives a huge benefit. For example, I think this is the Macintosh virtualized Windows operating system, where you have virtualized Macintosh, Windows, and in the background you can see Linux Ubuntu distro. So you can do that too, and not being limited to just one in one session. So that's great. And the pacmans were shown in the lower side of the screen. Is not a real pacman, it's packet management software. That's how the Linux system works on. When you need to update your software, or as in Linux terms, packages, you just say to your package manager software, EA, the pacman, to update everything or update this package, and it becomes way more straightforward to update your system. So it's easier compared to at least Windows. Open source, as in, well, nowadays Windows licenses, yeah, you know that they cost like more over €100 or something. And if you buy a new PC that doesn't have somehow the Windows license on it, or something else, for example, a Chromebook, and you'd like a Windows, you need to pay for that Windows license if you want to install it. But with OpenSourceity, you can always run, for example, Linux, and just run these virtualized operating systems for free in their corresponding virtual machines. So that's that for the operating system on the go Switchup. Moving on to dedicating resources better. Okay, if there were no virtualization in, for example, the business world, each person would have to have their own computer, and that would like cost a lot of electricity and drain a lot of power, not being environment friendly. But with virtualization, people could also have one computer that would like chop up the resources, the CPU, GPU, memory power, everything corresponding to their needs. So that kind of like waste of an energy and resources and material, that does not happen in that much of a bigger scale as without virtualized environments. And as I said before, it's naturally way more greener than using non-virtualized solutions in the business world, because it drains way less energy, and it is thus way more cheaper too. And when talking about the larger pool of tools to choose from, here are, for example, the Office apps we all know and love, and we use them every day, for example, in the University of Helsinki. Or if you want to use, for example, GarageBand from Macintosh, you can do that too because of virtualization. And then there's the Kali Linux hackers tools and everything, mostly available on Kali Linux distribution. So, but with virtualized environments, you can have all of those in the same place without dual booting and without buying an extra pair of a computer just to use those tools. You can use every tool in everywhere. And that's the most important point in this section. Also, you can see Jack and Daxter in the right top corner. You can also virtualize, for example, consoles, all consoles that are no longer being produced. So it's not just PCs, but also, for example, virtualized consoles. Of course, this is a subgenre called emulation, but PS1, PS2, PS3, everything of those can be virtualized in modern machines. And I think it's really convenient too. It preserves the hugely considered good titles, while still also, well, you know, that kind of stuff. So that can be done too. And moving on to the security aspect of a virtualized environment, you can take the analogy of if you've just got a Trojan or something, which I never seen happen in today's consumer life. But anyways, if you happen to have some kind of malware into your computer, which is like really bad and you can't get rid of it, if you have a virtualized environment, it doesn't have actually any kind of straight connections to your actual computer. And there, for example, there are those hobbyists in the internet who kind of want to nuke out your operating system. They virtualize a Windows XP or something that doesn't have any actual support up to date. So they just download all the viruses and malware there and just see how the operating system collapses. With knowing that virtualized, infected or otherwise compromised operating system cannot hurt the original operating system because it's virtualized. It doesn't have any straight connections to the actual components that are being passed through to the environment. So, of course, this way it is way more safer to use a virtualized environment than just to use the environment you're using straight on your motherboard, because yes, it is way more safer. 11 minutes mark. Disclaimers and cons. It's way too hard for the customer in 2020 to virtualize an environment, so that the benefits of it would be far greater than the disadvantages of not virtualizing an operating system. 100% component pass-through is never possible. You can understand that the idea of a good virtualized environment operating systems, they require the pass-through to pass through your components directly, so the virtualized environment can hijack them and get all of the power that the original operating system would have gotten. And because even though the layer would be really thin and it would be a 99% component pass-through, it is never going to get to the 100%. Although it's getting really near with the current technology. Most of the video games anti-cheat software, if they're competitive software, they don't actually allow virtualized machines because of how you can actually manipulate the virtualized operating system environment so easily. So all kinds of hacks and advantages can be injected more easily into the virtualized environments. And that is why most of the video game companies that use the competitive scheme don't allow virtualized environments. So that's a bit of a minus. And also the Apple's M1 chip we just launched, it's just the reality that with them launching the M1 chip, they have single-handedly killed the virtualization of Macintoshes on any other operating system. It's because the contract with Intel just ended and we can't fake out any M1 chip because they had the Intel processor contract. Any system with an Intel processor could be given to the virtualized Macintosh system, hey, this is a Macintosh, a Mac Mini or something, and the virtualized Macintosh would just believe it. But with their own processor being there, and none of the current computers don't use the M1 because it's Apple's own processor. We can't virtualize Macintosh in the future. Well, so far that's the case. And methods, I'm running out of time. So here's just a quick example of actually how does one virtualize a operating system or the PlayStation example in the bottom section. So it's really not that hard. Of course, even though I mentioned that it's too hard for the customer, but it's good to keep it in the slideshow that it is really this simple to virtualize your own operating system or emulator for that matter in your own PC nowadays. It's really not that difficult. And to sum it up, here are also the last points I wish that you could get from this slideshow, at least. I thank you.